Yeah, so there are several reasons why philanthropy or volunteering matters to businesses. Number one, it's all about being a good corporate citizen. Especially if you're a small business owner and you're in a community, let's say Atlanta, for example, you can become a pillar of that community, not only from a business perspective, but if you're giving back to the community and finding ways to uplift your community, you could become a central kind of player or pillar of that community. And that only benefits your business. Number two, of why this all matters is because as a business, you're taking from your community resources. And so it only makes sense and it's only the right thing to do to give back to the community. And I absolutely fundamentally believe that businesses can be a force for good. It just takes effort.
You're listening to the Black to Business podcast, an educational podcast providing Black entrepreneurs with the tools and resources to start and grow their businesses. We chat with vetted Black entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and business owners as they provide tips and resources to help take your business to the next level. I'm your host, Monique T. Marshall.
Welcome back. So I'm really excited about today's episode because it's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And today we're going to be talking about giving back. As business owners, we go into business to fulfill a need and to serve our customers. But oftentimes we neglect to serve the very communities that we operate in or just serve in general. So trust me, I'm preaching to the choir because this is something that we haven't implemented in the past within Black to Business, but it's definitely something that we're working on implementing moving forward. And I think about one of the main reasons I started Black to Business, it was because I saw that there was a need in my community. There was a need for a better way of living. And to me, I knew that creating more sustainable businesses would give us a better way of life and a better community. So it feels good to have a business that allows me to directly give back to my community through resources and talking about entrepreneurship. But of course, we can do more. So because this topic is so near and dear to my heart, and I know it's something that we need to work on, I wanted to invite someone on the podcast who could talk about why it's so important and give actionable steps on where we can start now and how. So I invited Jeremy Brown, who is the founder of Startups Give Back today, to share with us some ways that we can implement a give back strategy in our startup, and also some ways to do so with a small or larger team. So please help me and welcome my guest, Jeremy Brown. So Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I'm so excited to talk about today's topic, but also to have you on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So what I like to do in the beginning is if you could just take some time to briefly explain what you do, a little bit about your story so our listeners can know who you are.
Sure, absolutely. So by day, I am a content marketing manager for a technology company based in San Francisco. And by night, I run several brands, including Startups Give Back. So I'll give your listeners a little kind of behind the scenes of how Startups Give Back got started. So when I graduated from college in 2011, I joined a really large organization based in San Francisco. Now, this company had lots of resources, lots of employees around the world, lots of money in the bank, but not one time did we ever give back. We never made any donations. We never volunteered, nothing. Not to say that this was discouraged from the executive team. It just wasn't something that was high on our priority list. And so I was there at that company for a little over a year. And then when I left that company, I joined a very small startup based in San Francisco. And the very first week on the job, we went out and volunteered. And it just so happens that one of the executives at the company came from Salesforce. And if you're familiar with Salesforce, in my opinion, is one of the most philanthropic companies on the planet. And he came with this whole philanthropic DNA kind of mindset that he brought to this new startup. And so what happened was that every time we had a new group of employees, we went out and volunteered. And so for me, this was something that was a new experience. And I realized that we were doing it for two reasons. Number one, it's very important to give back as a company. We have the resources, so we might as well give back. And number two, it makes for a very amazing team building activity. And so fast forward about 3 or 4 months after that, I started thinking about, okay, my current company, how we are a small startup. We have very limited resources, but we're still able to give back versus a large company that I came from. we had all the resources and we never gave back. And so that got me on this path of trying to figure out how can I get more companies involved? And so that became Startups Give Back. And essentially what Startups Give Back is a volunteering event, and we bring together companies to volunteer in the community. And so we help nonprofits. And so we kind of blend networking and volunteering to create this really amazing experience. And so for the past 6+ years, I've been doing that. And that also eventually created other brands based off of my experience with Startups Give Back and entering the social impact space. And so for the past 8 years, I've been in the tech space, working in the marketing arena and helping small startups grow, but also in the social impact side of things and building up Startups Give Back and all the other brands. So that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. And a great story, because I also resonate with that story, because even after I graduated from Howard, I went to work with a startup. And while I was interning, while I was at Howard with bigger companies, I didn't see that. But afterwards, I worked with a smaller startup, and we had an initiative towards social responsibility. So it's interesting how, the smaller companies do focus on that.
Absolutely. I kind of feel like it's like this it's kind of baked into the millennial mindset for some odd reason. The millennial generation, I'm including that generation just so everybody knows. We have this mentality of wanting to give back, wanting to create businesses that actually make a difference. So it's not just us saying, "Oh, we want to change the world." That's kind of the language that a lot of especially tech startups use. We want to change the world, but it seems like the millennial generation, even younger now, are really kind of exemplifying what that actually means to build businesses that change the world.
Definitely. And so, Jeremy, one of the things that our audience does here at Black to Business is we have service-based entrepreneurs, so those who provide professional service. So, of course, they want to serve. One of the things is a lot of times companies are smaller and they're thinking they don't have the resources. How can sometimes it's just a one-team person. But I think it's important for, like you said, to have it in the DNA. So I just want you to share, why it matters. One, why does volunteering and philanthropy matter in business, but also how can they do it from a smaller level?
Yeah, so there are several reasons why philanthropy or volunteering matters to businesses. Number one, it's all about being a good corporate citizen. Especially if you're a small business owner and you're in a community, let's say Atlanta, for example, you can become a pillar of that community, not only from a business perspective, but if you're giving back to the community and finding ways to uplift your community, you could become a central kind of player or pillar of that community. And that only benefits your business. Number two of why this all matters is because as a business, you're taking from your community resources. And so it only makes sense, and it's only the right thing to do to give back to the community. And I absolutely fundamentally believe that businesses can be a force for good. It just takes effort. Now, I hear this a lot when it comes to bandwidth issues and, I don't have the resources. What I tend to do is and how I answer this question is take a step back. And this is especially for business owners that might have multiple employees. Audit how much money you're spending on employee engagement activities. Now, in the tech sector, a lot of tech companies have all these perks and fancy things that they give their employees because they're trying to keep them happy. And they spend thousands upon thousands, at some companies, millions of dollars on employee engagement. Now, volunteering and being active in your community, that is cost effective. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort or even money to go out to a soup kitchen and serve food for 3 hours to people who are going through homelessness. And so it just takes a little bit of an effort. Now, for the business owners that are maybe a single person, again, this is all about auditing your time and figuring out where you're putting your time. And I have a suspicion that most people would be able to carve out 2 to 3 hours every quarter, or at least a couple times a year, to go out and volunteer in their local community. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort to actually do that. It's more of a understanding of where your time is going.
Definitely. And one of the things, of course, is we like to talk about how to do these things. So from a startup perspective, some people who are listening, they're like, okay, this is something I've been thinking about. How am I going to implement this in the foundation of my business? So I want you to share, what are some ways, or I guess even for you, some of the steps that you went to say, even for new employees onboarding, this is something that we do, and then this is a part of our business strategy.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the very first thing I would recommend any business owner do when they're thinking about implementing this into their company is to audit. I use audit a lot because it's really important, but audit what the company values are, what the mission of the company is, and also what you do as a business. And that'll kind of steer you in the direction in terms of, what you care about as a business. And that's very important because when it comes to volunteering and philanthropy, you want to ensure this is a long-term thing. And the only way to ensure that is to make sure that what you're doing, like the organizations that you're working with, how you're donating your money and your time, are going towards things that you actually care about as a business. So that's the very first step. If you have employees, do an audit of them. What do they care about as it relates to your business? You want to make sure that that is all in alignment, because that's what's going to allow you to do this long term. There's a lot of companies out there that I've interacted with over the years that started really hot with philanthropy and giving back, but they quickly their efforts basically kind of fizzled away because they were never in alignment with what their actual business cares about. So they were working with organizations, and that's great. But those organizations, the nonprofits that they were working with, never matched, what they wanted to do as a business, what their missions were, and what the values were. And so, my recommendation is to make sure there's absolute alignment before you do this. That's the foundation of this.
Love that. And going back to what you said, I know a lot of times when I look at companies' pages, I am seeing what initiatives they're doing. How are they giving back in the community? So even when you mentioned that they're falling off with this, I think millennials, we do care that they're doing that. So again, that's something to think about as a business owner too.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to mention too, just from, and you said it perfectly for the millennial generation, one thing that business owners need to realize too, when it comes to recruiting, mm-hmm. Millennials are looking for companies that not only are making money as a business, but also giving back. Like that's an important component to it. So if you're trying to recruit people, that's a great way to attract talent. Having a kind of a volunteering or a philanthropy program or even department, if you can afford that, but just having kind of a stance on where you are as a business as it relates to giving back to the community. That's really important to attracting talent.
Definitely. And what do you think are some of the benefits? I know for some business owners, of course, it says it feels good, but what are the other benefits of giving back?
Yeah, from a business owner perspective, there's a lot of research out there around how giving back, volunteering in your community creates happier, healthier employees. Happier from this, and really it's like a mental health situation here. So there's tons of research that correlates volunteering with healthier minds, healthier employees. Again, being a good corporate citizen. So when you're actively giving back to your community, and it's even a tight knit community, you become a pillar of that community, and people start looking towards you as that central kind of player in the community and the good things that you're doing for it. And also from just a pure PR perspective, giving back does attract people to companies. People want to do business with companies that they like and trust. And being an active member in your community does present that. And from a pure bottom line perspective, that's good.
Yes. And so thinking about, of course, where to look and places to volunteer, how can business owners go about doing that?
There are several online websites that you can use to find opportunities to volunteer. Match is one. LinkedIn is another good source. Twitter, and then our good friend Google. And also, I'm going to do a quick little plug here, but startups give back. And so one thing that we've been working on really since the beginning of the organization's founding was creating chapters of Startups Give Back really in every startup hub around the world. And we were just getting started. We now have chapters in Vancouver, Canada, Austin, Texas, Silicon Valley in San Francisco, as well as San Diego. And so if you happen to be in those locations, you can always reach out to Startups Give Back, and we'll recommend some organizations that you can volunteer with. So, but I do recommend Volunteer Match, LinkedIn, Twitter, as well as Google to do these searches.
Okay. And speaking about Startups Give Back, so let's talk about what it is exactly, or how you operate Startups Give Back. So you mentioned the chapters. Now, how does it work with companies? You working with companies, and how do you partner with these organizations? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we have two offerings. So our first offering is what we call our flagship offering. This is completely free for everyone involved, including companies and the nonprofits that we partner with. But essentially what we do is we run monthly volunteering events. Now, obviously, this is the COVID era, so we're now doing virtual volunteering events and activities. And so essentially what happens is companies sign up their employees, and let's say we're doing an in-person event. They'll come out to, let's say we're doing a park cleanup. We might have 3 or 4 companies come out to participate in this park cleanup. So not only are they getting a chance to give back to their community and learn a little bit about the nonprofit that we're partnering with, but they get a chance to network with other professionals. And so even from like a business development perspective, this is a unique opportunity to get to know other people in your space and potentially, strike up a business conversation. You never know what can happen. And so we do monthly volunteering events, and they're anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, sometimes a little bit longer depending on what we're doing. And it's just a really fun experience for companies to get involved with. Now, the second offering is what we call our premium offering. This is specifically for companies who want a volunteering activity organized just for their employees. So they just want it centralized for their company. And then what I'll do is I'll go in and help them organize that. So I'll find the nonprofits that they might want to partner with and just do all the coordinating and the logistics behind that, mainly so that the company doesn't have to even worry about it. So the same thing with the flagship offering. That's one of the unique value props for businesses that get involved, is they don't have to worry about any logistics. So a lot of the companies that attend our volunteering activities are startups, and they don't have a social impact team or somebody in-house that handles their volunteering efforts. And so that's why they lean on Startups Give Back. So that's a little bit about what we do in terms of how we organize our volunteering events and how we interact with companies.
I love that, because I know a lot of times, people do want to delegate. So, you don't have the time, or you want to do something and you're figuring out, okay, this organization is already doing it. So that's great that you handle that part of it.
Exactly.
And so speaking of, helping and some of these businesses that you've been able to help, what are some of the success stories that you've seen of transformations for businesses?
Yeah, a lot of the transformation that I see is in the faces. Again, this is pre-COVID, in the faces of the people who actually volunteer. They have a fun time. They get a chance to give back, and they get a chance to network. And a lot of these people from the tech space, especially, we're all used to the traditional way of networking, going to a happy hour or some type of conference, and the same thing happens. You go into an area where people are networking, you grab a drink, usually wine or a beer, and you all get in a little semicircle and strike conversations. It's really transactional. And the one thing about Startups Give Back volunteering events is it's way, way, way less transactional, because that's not the priority. The priority is giving back and helping nonprofits. And so what happens is a lot of these conversations tend to bubble up organically, and it gives people a chance to get to know each other in an organic, natural way versus getting to know somebody, with a beverage in hand and in a large conference room with a lot of loud noise. So that's what makes kind of Startups Give Back unique in that way.
That's true. And so how has, this is a big initiative, and I'm sure you've changed a lot of people's lives, like you said. How has this transformed you personally, and even for your business? How have you seen the transformation?
So I love doing this work. And for me personally, I get so much satisfaction out of not only volunteering, but getting other people involved. And, just when we go to organizations that are doing some incredible work, and just seeing the kind of the aha moment in people's minds when they learn about an organization and what they're actually doing and the impact they're making, that's where I get the most satisfaction out of. And even more than that, after doing these volunteering activities and just hearing the feedback from the volunteers and what they learned and really understanding the actual impact they're making. For example, the San Francisco Food Bank is one nonprofit that we work with pretty frequently. And the one thing I love about going to the food bank is they always give us an idea of how much food we pack. And then they tell us how many people that's going to impact. And I think that's one of the missing components of a lot of volunteering activities is not every nonprofit tells you the actual impact you're making based off of the work that you're doing. And the one thing that is going to keep volunteers coming back over and over again is them knowing exactly what their impact is. And so for me personally, that's where I draw the most satisfaction out of. And just from a transformational perspective, I go back to what I said kind of in the beginning of this podcast of talking about mental health and physical health. Like I physically and mentally feel happier when I volunteer. Like I feel it. And that's not me just saying it just because I have an organization that focuses on volunteering. That's me saying it because I actually feel it.
And that's amazing. I felt that when you said that. So I definitely can feel that. So Jeremy, it seems like, you have, I'm pretty sure to build an organization like this, you've had to have like some personable skills. Like, what do you think helps you work? Because, manage these relationships that you've gotten with these businesses. How did you go about that? And do you feel that your personality plays a part into that?
Yeah, I do feel like my personality does play into that. I do know I'm very self-aware, excuse me, in the sense that I know what my superpower is. My superpower is building community. And the reason why I believe that is a superpower is because it comes from a genuine place. When I build these communities, I'm doing the things I'm doing with Startups Give Back or my other brands, it's coming from a genuine perspective. It's not transactional. I'm not trying to get something from somebody. It's because I genuinely care. Like that's why I created Startups Give Back, and I've done it for free for over 6 years because I care about it. And so that's why I do what I do, is because I absolutely care about getting companies more involved in their community, because I know how much that means to a community, number one. And number two, what that actually can do for organizations and nonprofits who are actually trying to change the world. Because when it comes to trying to do something to better the world, our nonprofits out there are the ones actually on the front lines doing it. And so it's a responsibility, in my opinion, for business to actually acknowledge that and give as much support as they possibly can.
Absolutely. And so how did you go about getting these relationships, and, how's your team, or, you have people to help you, and how do you reach out to these people?
Yeah. And shout out to Olivia. So Olivia, I met Olivia at the very first volunteering event, and, she showed a real interest in social impact and getting into this space. And so she's kind of been my right-hand woman in the sense that she's helped me out a lot through the growth of Startups Give Back and growing that from brainstorming to running volunteering events on her own. She's been a tremendous help. Now, in terms of making the business connections and things like that, it's just being active. It's not being afraid to, cold email or cold call somebody that you have an interest in, and seeing if you can, create a conversation there. Leveraging LinkedIn a lot. I use LinkedIn religiously to reach out to people that I'm interested in connecting with, in a genuine way, obviously. You definitely don't want to be transactional or come from a marketing perspective on LinkedIn, because people can sniff through that. You want to have a genuine kind of reason to reach out to somebody. But using tools like LinkedIn to connect with social impact leaders or nonprofits or people in companies that I believe would be, a key person in that organization to, talk about getting that company involved somehow, some way. And so using those type of tools, not being afraid to cold email or cold call. Because the way I look at it is, the worst that can happen is someone saying no. And if someone says no, that's fine. Go, okay, that's a no. Okay, I'm going to, pivot and look elsewhere. And a lot of times a no only means no at that moment in time. You never know what can happen 3 months, 6 months down the road, right? And so when you get those no's, you definitely want to bookmark that and plan to follow up at a later time. because again, you never know what can happen. Things can change. You never, and from a volunteering perspective, if you reach out to a company and they're saying, okay, yeah, that's interesting, but we're not ready to do that right now, or we're just not interested right now. That's fine. But you never know. 7 months down the road, they might have a different tune, right? And so if you're constantly following up and just not allowing those leads to, fall by the wayside, you never know what can happen from a business perspective. So those are the kind of the ways that I've built those business connections. And then also organizing events, like live events from meetups and conferences and things like that, has been a fantastic way of building these relationships. So prior to COVID, I was doing an in-person meetup probably once every, I say, 4 to 5 months, and finding other partners to work with on those events. And since then, that's basically how I built the bulk of my contacts and relationships within the social impact space, is through these events and using online tools like LinkedIn to reach out to people and things like that.
And you mentioned a great point, because you say pre-COVID. So COVID is happening now. A lot of people, you aren't able to gather. So, giving back doesn't always mean like in person. So what are some other ways that people can give back or lend their services and things like that?
Yeah. So now that we are in COVID times, there are definitely opportunities to give back. There are activities that you can do. For example, working with organizations that focus on youth education, and they do mock interviews or homework help. So those are things that you can do virtually as well. But other ways you can give back, both from a nonprofit perspective, but also you can give back to small businesses, is becoming an advisor. So utilizing your professional skills and talents to give back in that way. So that's more skills-based volunteering. And so there's some companies out there that focus on that too. And Startups Give Back is one of them. We do have some programs in place that allow people to leverage their talents, whatever that might be, to give back to nonprofits that need that kind of talent or support. So those are a couple of ways that people can give back right now. And frankly, until we can get back into in-person volunteering and things like that, virtual is going to be the thing to do. And so, again, skills-based volunteering is an activity that you can do, but also, things like homework help, and reading a book. So there's some nonprofits that focus on, again, youth, but mainly kids, where you can read a book via Zoom or some other kind of online video platform. So there are definitely some opportunities out there.
I like that. Lending your skills and talents. I love that. And so, Jeremy, I know you mentioned LinkedIn. So one of the questions I always ask as a business owner, what is your favorite tool or resources that's really like you can't live without it, or has really changed your business and how you operate?
Yeah, it has to be LinkedIn. It has to be LinkedIn. That's literally, if I could have one social media platform, it would be LinkedIn. Because my audience is there. The people that I talk to, the people that I partner with, have relationships with, they're all business-oriented individuals. And so they're all on LinkedIn, they're active, and that's my community. And so LinkedIn is the one tool that I cannot live without. And if LinkedIn goes away, hopefully there's something else that's equivalent.
No, LinkedIn go. I really like LinkedIn too. Lately I've been getting into it, but I think it is one of those things that are really growing for other people who aren't aware of the power of LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's an untapped source that a lot of especially small business owners who might have a profile, but just haven't been active. It's such an untapped resource to use, even from a pure marketing perspective of being able to talk about business, be able to share content, be able to write content and build a community and build authority on a topic. That's really important for small business owners, especially. And so that platform is ripe for a lot of this type of stuff to happen. So if you're not using LinkedIn, I highly recommend learning about it. If you're not familiar with it, if you are familiar with it, just be more active. Start reaching out to people, join groups, share content, write content, post videos. Maybe it's you talking about a topic that you care about. Start building those connections and relationships and building your own authority and thought leadership. That's a great platform to do that.
Amazing. And so is there anything, on this journey, you say you've been doing it for 6 years, is there something that you wish you know now that you wish if you would have known then when you started or earlier days as an entrepreneur?
There are several things. Number one, get started. I throughout my career, I've tried different types of projects. They never stuck because I wasn't passionate enough about them. But the one thing that I wish I would have done sooner, especially with Startups Give Back, was starting sooner. Now, I will say that for me, at least, I had to go through certain kind of career and life experiences for that to materialize. But if you're sitting on an idea and you are really passionate about that idea, you're really adamant about that idea, like you want to work on that, don't wait any longer. Get something out there. A lot of times, and I know this from experience, we have ideas and we sit on those ideas for a long time and we never actually explore them. We never know if they can become viable businesses or viable side hustles or side projects. And so that's one thing, is to start sooner. And then the other thing that I would mention is the power of community. Now, what that means is a lot of times when you're building a business, you focus on just the business, whether it's a product or service, and then the community comes afterwards. And I see this all the time in the tech space where tech entrepreneurs will build a product or a service and they'll go and they'll try to sell and whatnot. And then later on, they focus on, okay, how can we start building a community around our product? And I have found through my work with Startups Give Back, the reverse is just as strong. So starting with the actual community, what that means is if you have a passion about a topic, for example, for me, it's social impact, and you use the various tools that are out there, online community tools, even using Slack. Slack is a really awesome community kind of tool, even though it's not really meant for that. But if you go the community route first and you build that community, it becomes so much easier down the road when you decide to create a product or service, because you already have your actual audience that you want to sell to. You already have that audience. You already have their ear. They trust you. They like you. It makes it easier to sell. And so to give you an example of this, so in 2019, I created another brand called Social Impact World. And the idea behind that was to create a community for social impact leaders. And so prior to even offering any type of products or services or opening up advertising for outside companies, I wanted to build an actual community first. And so again, this is back in late 2019, probably December 2019. And so from 2019 to current day, we now have over 3,000 members in the Social Impact World community.
Wow.
Selling a product or service. So now, going forward, when we do decide to open up advertising for companies, or if I do decide to create a product or a service to complement Social Impact World, I now have the very people that I want to sell to in my community. They know me, they trust me. I like to think that they like me. and so it makes selling easier. And that is a topic that I don't think is discussed enough for business owners, especially if you have an idea right now and you don't have a full-on business and you're not selling a product or service. There's no reason why you can't start creating the community first.
I agree. That's that like, trust, and know. I have to like, trust, and know you before I get the product or whatever. So I like that. The power of the community.
It makes it so much easier to sell. I really believe that communities are really, really underrated from a business perspective, because everyone's so fixated on selling a product or service that they forget about, the network effects and how powerful a community can actually be.
Of course. And is there a favorite, one of your favorite reads or some recommended read that you can give to our audience?
Yes. So I actually have two, and I recommend reading both of these books, so one after the other. So the first one is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is an absolute must read in my opinion. It's more of it's a classic. Absolutely. So just to give your listeners an idea of what the book is about, at least how I interpret it. So the book is about really finding your destiny or finding your purpose as a human being. Why are you here on earth? What is your purpose? Why were you born a human and not a cow or a horse, right? And for me, when I read this book, I was early on in my career and I didn't have any guidance. I didn't know exactly what my purpose was until I read this book. For whatever reason, the story and how it's written and how it unfolds, it really helps you understand, or at least think about your place here on earth. So that's the first book I recommend. The second book I recommend reading after The Alchemist is Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk. And what this book is about is really cashing in on your passion. Now, you hear about this all the time. Follow your passion, follow your passion, follow your passion. I am here to say that following your passion, in my opinion, is one of the most important things a person can do. Now, I will say this, following your passion may not always lead to a large business or even a lucrative business. Maybe it's just kind of a side hustle type of deal. But having something that you do that you absolutely love doing changes the game. Mental state of mind, health, everything. It changes the game. And so Crush It really talks about A, what is your passion? And then B, how do you turn that into a business? What can you do? Whether it's, creating trinkets and selling it on Etsy, or maybe you love going to garage sales and buying, really cool items and then selling them on eBay. But find that passion and follow that passion and figure out a way to turn that into a business, because business is hard. As every business owner that's listening to this podcast knows, it's hard. And there are probably times where people want to quit. But when you're doing something that you absolutely love, it makes it a little bit easier.
I certainly agree. I love that. I will have to pick up that Crush It. So thank you for that recommendation.
Absolutely.
So Jeremy, this has been amazing. You have dropped so much knowledge, and I feel like, people feel that they want to make a difference and they have the actionable steps to do that. So thank you for sharing with us.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. And so I'm sure people want to know, how can they find you? How can they support you? So any contact information and social media channels that they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to contact me, it's jeremy@startupsgetback.org. I love talking to people. And if I can help you, I'll figure out a way to help you. In terms of social media, I am at Social Jeremy on all major platforms. So TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. That's my online alias. So those are the two ways to connect with me.
It's so interesting hearing people say TikTok first now.
That's a hot platform now.
It really is. So thank you so much, Jeremy, for being here. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next time. Okay, so I feel good. And one, because I feel like I can actually be philanthropic as a small business owner. And essentially what philanthropy is it includes donating your time or money to a worthy cause. Doesn't that sound like fancy? So we are all about to be fancy because we know that it's possible. And Jeremy really gave us some ways that I didn't even know about, like volunteer your skills and expertise. So not only are we about to be fancy, but we are about to be making a difference and feeling good about doing it. One of the things that really resonated with me was when Jeremy mentioned that he physically and mentally feels happier when he volunteers. It really resonated with me because I remember doing alternative spring break in college, and this was where we opted to spend our spring break volunteering. And I chose to go to New Orleans and help rebuild schools after Katrina. And that's a memory that truly made me feel good. Another time, I decided to go back home to Georgia from DC and volunteer at my local community center the summer after my sophomore year at Howard University. And looking back, I remember feeling good about myself and knowing that I was helping my community in some way. So I encourage you to take the time to make it a priority to feel good about yourself and your community and your business by implementing a small initiative to give back. And remember, this is a no judgment space, and no matter how big or small, doing something is better than doing nothing. So start now. Trust me, I get it. We're all busy because running a business is no easy task, but use volunteering as a time to also relax and practice being present. So, as always, take care of yourself, family, and until next time.